Department of Justice moves to have the corruption case against Mayor Adams dropped. Good evening, I'm Dick Brennan. CBS News New York has learned that the DOJ issued a memo to Manhattan federal prosecutors. Jennifer Bisram is live at City Hall with the latest. Jennifer, any activity there?
Hi, Dick. And no activity at the moment. This decision just coming down within the last hour or so. But let's get to what we know so far. Take a look at that memo you just mentioned that CBS News obtained instructing prosecutors in the Southern District of New York to abandon the charges. The DOJ is saying the prosecution is hampering Adams' ability to help the administration crack down on immigration. Now, we first heard talks about the possibility of this happening last month. That's when the Justice Department was discussing dropping the charges. Now, it comes after lots of political back and forth between the mayor and President. Adams and President Donald Trump met in Florida before the inauguration. He maintains they did not discuss the case then, but Adams then abruptly canceled planned appearances for Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in New York City to attend the president's inauguration after a last-minute invite. President Trump had previously said he thought Adams was treated unfairly and said he would consider pardoning the mayor. But if the case is dismissed, the mayor would not have to be pardoned. Now, back in September, Adams was indicted on 5 counts of corruption, including bribery, conspiracy, and corruption finance violations. He pleaded not guilty and since has maintained his innocence. Now, back here live again, Dick, not much happening here at City Hall at the moment, but we have to remember this is not a done deal just yet. The decision to drop the charges still needs to be formally submitted by prosecutors and then approved by the judge overseeing this case. We are live from City Hall. Jennifer Bisram, CBS News, New York.
All right, Jen, thanks very much. Now let's bring in political reporter Marcia Kramer. And wow, this is, may have seen it coming, but maybe not tonight. Kind of staggering. First of all, we know Trump had indicated he didn't like the case. He didn't like the charges. He thought it was political. The critics are going to be saying there's something really not right about this.
Well, you know, the critics are going to say that, but I think that if you take a look at this memo, they had a lot of they reasoned it out to give the judge an opportunity to see what they were talking about. But I think that you need to understand one thing about this memo. It doesn't clear him totally. He has to agree in writing that this is dismissed without prejudice. Now, here's what that means. It can be brought back again. And they say in the memo that actually they can review it after the 2025 election. So that means he can run and say he's been dropped. But then afterwards, if he's been a good boy, they'll be good. And if not, who knows?
A cynic might say that the chances of those charges coming back, if Adams is reelected, might be a little less so, based on what the president thinks.
But see, what I think is also interesting in this directive is it tells the prosecutors to take no further actions to investigate him while this is going on, while he's trying to run for re-election. That's a really big deal for the mayor because there will be no further charges and no further leaks about what's going on.
And we heard from SCNY just a couple of weeks ago that they were considering adding charges. So this has been a very active case. And speaking of active, there's something about a mayoral campaign coming up, a primary in June. And you have to say that this might scramble everything. I think there was a former governor who was interested in perhaps running for mayor.
A former governor? Oh, my God.
I'll tell you about it later. No, seriously, though. Andrew Cuomo, I mean, there's a lot going on here.
So here's the thing. What this is going to do is going to make everybody reevaluate their campaigns and whether they want to run against him, number one. Number two, Andrew Cuomo has to reevaluate whether he wants to get into the race because now you're running against a mayor who can say that he's been cleared, and they have the same base. So it could have a chilling effect on who runs, and it could be a boon for Mayor Adams as he seeks to get another term.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think Andrew Cuomo said that he wouldn't get in if Adams was still in, but that was many moons ago. So it's going to be interesting to say the least. And for more insights now, we're going to be joined by criminal defense and civil rights lawyer Mayo Bartlett. First of all, we have to ask you, sir, Marcia and I were just discussing that this is always quite stunning, but it's sort of been in the works for the last couple of weeks. We saw there were meetings at the Justice Department between Adams's attorneys, et cetera. What is your reaction to this happening right now?
Well, whenever you look and you see that the federal government, state government, or local government has taken upon itself to bring charges, there's generally a political element to it. When I look at what's happened with Mayor Adams, there are those who say that he's only been charged because he was critical of the way that immigration was being handled when busloads of people were coming to New York City, and he was critical at that time of the president and of the governor. I would not say that those were the only reasons, but when you look at the breadth of what he was charged with, it really does sort of pale in comparison to lots of the things that we generally see. Much of what they're talking about are getting upgrades on planes, getting money from multiple donors who are straw donors, which means that they're not the actual donor, but then you're placing the burden upon the person receiving the donation to know where that money's coming from. So lots of people would say, well, if you are a candidate for mayor and you're receiving small donations, let's say $1,000 and less, that you would not necessarily know who's actually giving you those donations. But as stated earlier, it's not an indication that the case just totally goes away. They always have the ability to resurrect it. But normally, once you go down this path, it's much less likely that you're going to see the charges come back.
Mr. Bartlett, if I could just ask you a question. You know, the judge in this case has to actually accept the recommendation of the prosecutors and the Department of Justice. What's the possibility that the judge in this case could decide that he doesn't want to dismiss the case?
Judge, and that's a great question because quite often we overlook the power that a judge has. You'll have a prosecution and a defense, and they will try to work out a resolution to a case, but ultimately it's up to the judge to accept that resolution. So normally you'll go up and say, Judge, if it pleases the court, we think we've reached a resolution. And sometimes judges say no. Sometimes the judge says it would be a miscarriage of justice. And then there's separate things as well. You can have a case that's dismissed in the interest of justice. It doesn't mean that it's dismissed on the merits. So there may have actually been an underlying crime that could have been proven, but in the interest of justice, the overall picture makes sense for you to say that we're going to move to withdraw. But a judge can clearly say that they're not going to permit that.
So what's the chance, though, that he decides not to do it?
I don't think it's going to be significant. I think that it would be a very slim chance that if the prosecution is coming forward and they are making statements to the effect that it's going to be very difficult for them to prove the case. And in fact, I've seen it suggested that they believe that pretrial publicity would make it difficult for them to move forward from former prosecutors who were involved. Then I don't see a judge forcing them to move forward, to basically take the time of prospective jurors and to spend the court's time. So it would be against the interest of judicial economy for a judge to do that.
And we should point out, though, also the interim U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, Danielle Sassoon, she has to agree to bring this in front of a judge. This is not someone that Trump has put in that place. So the question is, would she perhaps defy the president or the DOJ, shall we say, and say, no, I'm not going to do this? I mean, presumably she could be fired, I'd imagine.
I'm a former prosecutor, and I have seen on many occasions and been in a position myself on many occasions where you have to have a conversation with your boss and let them know that sometimes you don't think that you can move forward because ethically sometimes there's an issue. Other times you learn of things that just make you question the wisdom of moving forward with a particular case. So she would be well within her rights to say that. However, she's an employee that's appointed at the pleasure of, so she's not a union appointed or not a union employee. So she doesn't really have per se an interest in her job that would be protected. So if someone asked her to resign, she'd have to basically go.
One more question, Mr. Bartlett. I wonder what effect you think this move will have on the other prosecutors in the office and also on the acting U.S. attorney, whether she decides to quit because she doesn't agree with this.
I'll say this. We're aware of the things that we've heard that have been stated publicly in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of the case. We have no idea what the actual strength of the case is. And I'll simply say that, many cases get indicted. There's a very famous saying that you can indict a ham sandwich. A grand jury can indict a ham sandwich. But a grand jury can also make sure that that ham sandwich does not get indicted. So when you stop and look at a case like this, we know so little. And it's got to be just volume after volume of discovery that exists in this case. There are strengths and weaknesses in the case, and they have to be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And as far as I can see, there were going to be certain parts of this case that are going to be very difficult for the prosecution to prove, especially when you look at the magnitude of what the alleged wrongdoing was. So you're talking about really a very small amount of money in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about tickets. We're talking about whether someone offers you meals, things along those lines. So I don't think that it would be a stretch for them to no longer want to prosecute Mayor Adams under these circumstances. It's also been suggested that Mayor Adams is not able to assist them in their efforts to enforce immigration law because he's focused on this criminal case. To me, that's a bit of a lesser consideration if I'm looking at pardoning someone or if I'm looking at dropping charges. But that being said, there are criminal cases where sometimes people have committed homicides, and those charges are not brought because those individuals are assisting law enforcement.
All right, a lot of steps to go. Mayor Bartlett, thank you so much for joining us, criminal defense attorney and civil rights attorney. Marcia Kramer, thank you for joining us, and we know you will be back on CBS 2 News at 11 with much more on this.
Thank you, Dick.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And the story is still breaking. As we learn more details, we'll bring them to you here on CBS News New York and on our website, cbsnewyork.com. More live team coverage is coming up, as we said, tonight.